All right, welcome to episode 68 of the At Bat Podcast presented by War Media, where we give you our thoughts on the latest Chicago baseball news, as well as take a trip around the league. I am Saul Rodriguez, joined by my War colleague in Gabe Wilkins, as well as Miles Porter, and again, joined by the Shy Kid himself, Mike Hughes. How's everybody doing? How you doing, Gabe?
Can't complain, man. It's definitely a lot to talk about. This NL wild card race is heating up, and then you got Seattle and Houston doing their thing in the American League West, trying to fight for that last wild card spot in the American League. Definitely got to say rest in peace to Brooks Robinson, the human vacuum cleaner. I know the city of Baltimore is mourning, but it's definitely a lot to talk about.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Hey, how about you, Mike? How you doing, man?
Man, I'm Kanye bound too today, man. Got a lot of things going on. I've been free Seiya Suzuki all day long. We've been having those conversations. I've been having Twitter beef all day. Big True Holiday fan over here, so it's been I'm also a Dame fan, so there's a lot going on in the world right now, and I don't know how I feel about any of it.
That's true. Like we before we came on, we're talking about the Bucks and Dame. It's like, dude, there's so much news going on right now. You could fill up 3-4 hours of podcast stuff. So yeah, you're right. How we doing, Miles? Glad to have you back, man. How we doing?
It was great to be back. You know, quite the game last night, man. Listen, I've been talking about this for I don't know how long. You could just add that to a list of like vintage Chicago Cubs moments.
Yeah.
Like my girlfriend was like, why is this hit you so hard? I'm like, this is being a Cubs fan right here.
Yep.
This moment right here, that's being a Cubs fan. But hey, the boys are up right now. I was saying, by the way, me and my dad were joking last night. I was like, I'm not comfortable unless we got 20 runs on the board. You know what we're playing right now? Yeah. So, I just I'm doing all right. About to get back into my, off-season routine. I got sick last week and getting ready for another fun season next year. So hopefully we could finish out strong this year. I'll be in Milwaukee on Saturday watching this team hopefully compete for something special in October.
Hey, that's crazy because it's not for sure yet, but I'm working on something to see if I can make it Saturday. So I might see you there. I'll tell you one thing: if the Cubs, and I guarantee you, if the Cubs are there like next week, knock on wood, obviously for the wild card series against the Brewers, I'm there. I'm showing up. One of those games, I'm showing up. I can't. Yeah, you can't. So everyone's here. Everyone's here. Yeah, everyone's invited. So we got it's gonna be crazy. But
the Brewers have to put a plan in. They're going to put a plan to bail y'all out.
Well, the thing is, they have done that. So I think it was I think it was like 2018 because I think if they would have won, they would have played. I forget if it was that one, but yeah, if they would have played. Oh no, 2019. It was because the Cubs
was it 163?
I can't think right now because so much stuff's going on in my brain right now. 2018 because that's when the Cubs lost the wild card game to the Rockies.
Right.
Yeah. The Rockies played the Brewers. Oh, there you go.
Because that was the year we played.
Right.
Yeah. Because they played the Brewers. Remember, they played the Brewers for the Central.
Yeah,
they had the tiebreaker for the Central. On that Monday, and then that Tuesday night, Colorado came in and beat them.
Yep. And so I remember because they had this whole thing where it was like put the zip code in, put your address, like you had to like do all this, like make sure it's people from like Wisconsin, and I'm like they had like a Wisconsin only pre-sale. I'm like, oh my god! I'm like it's ridiculous because if you think about it, I thought and people talked about it back then too. Is those people that are doing that? It's like you people are just gonna sell those. Like people that live in Wisconsin are just going to sell those to people from Chicago, right? It's like it's exactly the same thing. But yeah, they gotta get through the Braves first, and we'll talk that and just how Gabe talked about the and a wild card. We'll get into that as well as the AL West race because that like changes every minute. I feel like of the day, and as well as some White Sox talk because Luis Roberts' season ended early, as well as they faced Chris Sale, and I want to see what Gabe thinks about Garrett Crochet coming back, how he looked in his appearance. So we'll talk that as there's so much to talk about. So we'll start with the Cubs. As Miles kind of alluded to it, of course, they're facing the Braves right now. And we're sitting here recording this on a Wednesday, and the day after the Seiya Suzuki drop. And, fortunately, they're up right now 3-1. So not a lot of people are thinking about that right now, but still one of the crazier endings. But rewind a little bit to last week. They were at home. They had the Pirates for 3, the Rockies for 3. And we thought, man, it was going to be like it should be easy work, but this September the Cubs had just proven to us how hard these games are, no matter who you're facing. And they lost 2 out of 3 against the Pirates, and then swept the Rockies. So a good way to bounce back, but it's every day it's different. I know the Marlins are playing the double header today. They lost the first one. They're tied right now 1-1 in the second. So yeah, I mean, Miles, where are you sitting at? Like how I guess. I know the answer to this, but how comfortable are you right now with this wild card race and how things are unfolding?
Yeah, I'm extremely uncomfortable. No, I mean, we kind of dug ourselves a little bit of a hole with a few of those series these past few weeks. But at the same time, we have built ourselves enough wins this season to still be in the hunt, and we still have that wild card spot. So that's something very good to hold on to. It's just been lately. It's just been feeling like, at what point are we just going to completely lose it? Because it just felt like nothing has gone our way aside from that Rocky series. So, I like that we got a lead right now at the time of this recording in Atlanta, but obviously nothing is guaranteed there. Boys just got to keep playing. This is going to be where all the emotions come out for players and fans, and every pitch is on much more of a enhanced scale now. So not feeling super comfortable, but also not feeling negative about it. Just you kind of got to be on your toes and prepare for anything. Just get behind these boys as much as you can.
Yeah, seriously. And the thing is, like, tunnel vision. You gotta have tunnel vision. Just win, because all you do is technically, as you're up in the standings, you gotta just win. At the end of the day, like you can worry about it. Marlins can make it easier for you, sure, but at the end of the day, you just gotta win ball games. And that's like you just gotta have tunnel vision. And also another thing too is I will say is gotta be grateful also for being uncomfortable, because that's the reason they're in this spot is because they're playing competitive games. So even though yesterday was a devastating day, I was kind of thinking to myself, I still should be grateful for how devastated I feel, because this is you want to be in this race. But Mike, how we doing, man?
Right.
How did you take in that game last night and that error that hopefully we're past emotionally, but obviously we'll always think about it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to think about it at all, honestly. And that's just
Yeah.
me personally. As a coach and as a player playing the outfield
Yeah.
my whole life in center, like that happens more times than you think. I've lost the ball several times, and it just happens. And Seiya Suzuki, first and foremost, has been absolutely phenomenal. And we are not playing meaningful games right now without Seiya Suzuki in the months of August and September. He's batting over 300 since like August 15th, and he's been absolutely incredible. Batting 284. He has 20 home runs and 72, 73 RBIs on the season. He's been absolutely great. Coming into the season, you have an oblique injury, and it was devastating seeing that in the World Baseball Classic with Team Japan, and how we didn't really know what version of him we were going to get. The way he battled and fought back off day, it's really hard, man. When you miss all of training camp, when you miss all of spring training, when you miss the entire offseason because of an injury, and you're trying to play catch up in the months of April at Wrigley Field, it's a different monster. It's a different breed. So I like the fact that he's gotten us to where he is today. I just wanted to give him a minute and just talk about how important he's been for this team, because him and Cody Bellinger have been 1A and 1B for offensive units to this offense. And secondly, it comes down to key factors, and Miles alluded to it. Talking about losing 4 straight series, we talked about that last week with Gabe and Saul, talking about really what really went wrong for this team. And when you look at the series losses against Pittsburgh, when you look at the series losses against Colorado, and a couple not series losses, but just individual losses that I feel like you can look back on, you look at the Nationals. We dropped the game against the Nationals. Like that was something that happened, and that's something that shouldn't have happened. And you look at the series loss in July against the Red Sox, and it's definitely a situation to where when you look back at the end of this season, if anybody's sitting up here, which I don't think anybody on this panel is, but when I see all the fans talking about something, this was the moment the Cubs, got kicked out and bounced out of the playoffs. No, the moment we got bounced out of the playoffs was when we lost in September to the Pirates and the Rockies. Like that was the moment. That game last night would not have had 85% of the magnitude that it did if we would have just swept both of those series. Like, let's be real about it. So that's really how I felt about it. I'm still rocking with Seiya. I'm still, Justin Bieber is the man. I know it. That's my guy. I'm rocking with him. And I will say this is my last point I wanted to make. Justin Steele, so happy to see that, because we talked about last week how maybe he's injured, maybe there's something going on. He punched out not only the side, but the heart of the Atlanta offense. I mean, it was absolutely incredible to see him knock out Albies, Acuna, and Olsen, and Pilar as well. But, with that, it's just great to see him back at it. I'm really excited to get Adbert back. Jamer's back today. Things are coming together. We just got to be able to win these games.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. It's like, and that was what I was thinking about last night too, is the fact that you know, you could talk about say all you want, say all this stuff, but at the end of the day, they're only in that position because the bullpen gave up some runs, this and that, and earlier in the game. That's like the only reason that's talked about is because it happened late in the game, or else, you know, it wouldn't be talked about as much. So you're
And
right.
Happ missed one too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then Swanson had made an error too as well, and it was just more than one person. So it's like it's one of those things where people that are just making it about Seiya or Ross for that matter, and in that situation, like because there's a lot of, and I'll ask you about the defensive decisions that he made because you could say something about that, but even then, you know, he's not on the field. So, but
so if you, can we talk about that right now?
Yeah.
I would love to talk about that with
Sure,
Miles,
yeah.
and like if you want to, I would love to hear how you guys felt about that, because like mine is really short. At the end of the day, everybody's if Pete Crow Armstrong's out in center field, he would have caught that ball. No, I don't want to hear that, because
I agree.
Seiya waved off a Gold Glove center fielder, an MVP, and at the end of the day, I blame that more on Cody, because Cody as the center fielder, respectfully, part of my language, but fuck you, that's my ball, like as me. So if you think Pete Crow Armstrong was going to ignore, especially an 0 for 10 Pete Crow Armstrong, if you think he was going to ignore Seiya Suzuki waving him off, I didn't put any stock into that. Now, the decision to take him out, I didn't agree with, but that play specifically, I think the same thing would have happened.
I think so. Some of the decisions of like putting Wisdom at first is a little like I don't know how to explain it. It's I was kind of looking at it like, but I'm like, it's a couple innings, like it is what it is. See what happens, but. Yeah, I don't know. Gabe, what did you think about that? What did you think about the decisions that Ross has made, as well as just the Seiya catch in general, or the Seiya lack catch?
Well, I get what Mike is saying in regards to Cody, because with him
Mm-hmm.
being the center fielder, and even though it's been a while since I played baseball, but I played all three outfield positions when I played. And I know one thing about being the center field, you the quarterback of the outfield. You the one that call everything, you know, and if it was anybody that should have called someone off, it was Cody in that situation, with him being within close proximity to the ball. As far as, you know, those who were criticizing Seiya Suzuki for missing that ball, it's easy to miss a ball in the lights. And then, like Mike said, how can you criticize him? Because without him, you wouldn't be in this position. Seiya Suzuki's been carrying this ball club for over the last month and a half. And then, mind you, I think he only committed like 2 errors going into last night's game. So for the most part, he's played a quality right field for you and made big time plays. So it happens. But at the same time, you have to be able to bail guys out. And I think last night's loss really fell on the bullpen for not protecting the lead. You know, anytime you could get 5 1/3 from a Justin Steele, who, whether he's injured or laboring, or maybe he's a little bit fatigued, you would take that, especially against an Atlanta offense who, for the most part, he kept in check for most of the night until they started to figure him out a little bit towards the tail end of that 5th inning. But outside of that, I mean, they had their chances. And then also, they blew a lot of opportunities because they left 9 runners on base. And even though I believe they were like 6 for, I want to say 16 with runners in scoring position, like against a team like Atlanta, you can't take leaving runners in scoring position lightly at all. I don't give a damn what inning it is, because you know that offense is always going to find a way to get rallies, and when they get rallies, it ignites their ball club. You saw they bench at the top of the dugout. They knew what time it was, and those guys have always been like that, no matter who they're playing, and that's why they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in all of baseball. So the way I see it, as far as Ross and his defensive alignments, they didn't lose the game off that, in my opinion, the other night against Atlanta. They lost that game because of the bullpen, and that bullpen is what I think a lot of Cub fans are going to look back at, is what cost them a shot at the playoffs should they fail to garner that 3rd wild card, on top of what Mike said as well, losing series that you should have took care of business in against the likes of a Pittsburgh. Even when you had Arizona at home and you lost 3 out of 4. 2 out of those 3 games you lost were very winnable games, and you weren't able to do it. I think back to the game in July. I think it was July 3rd. They were in Milwaukee. They had a 6-run lead. They blew that game. You know, you talk about the series against the Nationals. Every game counts. Every game counts the same. And when you don't have a game 163 that you can rely on in an event of a tiebreaker, like we were saying prior to coming into the show, Saul, you got to take care of business. Plain and simple.
Yeah, and the thing is with tiebreakers, you mentioned tiebreakers. tiebreakers is not something Cubs fans want to hear either because they own nothing. At this point, nothing because the Giants are out. Like
Right.
that's the only one that they owned,
Right.
and they don't own any. So yeah, it's really it's rough out here for sure. But Miles, from your perspective as well as a player, like what are your thoughts on the whole Seiya situation, as well as just the defensive positioning that Ross is, with putting Wisdom at first, laying the game, and all that type of stuff. Like, what do you think about that? The positioning in general.
Yeah, I really like what Mike said, and even just as the outfield hasn't been my primary position, but in the times where I was put out there this year, one of the biggest things I'm always remembering is that the center fielder, that's the leader in the outfield. This is the guy, if he calls me off, I'm getting out the way. I don't care if I think I got it. If I hear him confidently calling the ball, I'm out of the way. And say, I think, and I don't remember if I saw Cody calling for that ball for the most part. It kind of looked like there was a little bit of hesitation and a little bit of surprise. That ball fell behind him. Shit happens, right? And so I don't know. I think for me, it's the pitching, man. I really don't, and I don't know. I'm not on Twitter, so I don't know what some things have been said, but for the most part, I don't know a lot of Cubs fans that are specifically pointing the finger at Suzuki. I think, I'm looking at Drew Smyly last night. Aside from, taking care of Ozuna and Harris, I think we're throwing a lot of waste pitches in the dirt. Now, at some point, I understand trying to get hitters a chase. I just didn't like that pitch sequence. I think it kind of got us in trouble a little bit because obviously the two runs that were the two players that were walked on base, those are the runs that scored. So I don't know. I feel like in terms of kind of what we want to do pitching wise, I still feel like we need some answers there. So hopefully these are things that can be addressed if we are in the playoffs. If there's some sort of game plan that they can change a little bit. I love the thought of making hitters chase. I swing hard. I swing a lot. So I understand this approach, but not every hitter's like that. There are definitely more patient hitters with, if they recognize that ball out of the pitcher's hand, they see that thing's going to be in the dirt. I'm not swinging at that. I'm not going for it. So I don't know. My issues with the pitching right now, aside from a very solid start from Steele, and I think we've gotten some very quality starts out of Tyone lately, especially, watching this game. We got some things to address. We really do, but it's great to have Candelario back. Kind of helps us with the flexibility of moving guys around a bit. So, let's see what happens going forward. But this was a team loss. Be nice to Seiya.
Awesome. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right. And I think even like looking at like the post game interview, like the dude was like distraught. Like that dude was like he felt so bad.
Wreck.
Yeah, literally, yeah. And like even and I liked what he said too was the fact that like, look, the lights contribute a little bit to it, but he's like playing in Japan and knowing how it is. I'm not quoting him by the way, but he's like knowing how it is in Japan. Like the lights always play a part, but that he can't say that because that's an excuse, so he won't say that. And I like him saying that because it is like it plays a part, but I'm sure speaking without experience here, it plays a part, but you can't blame it all on there. Because I mean, you play in a bunch of stadiums with like the lights and all that stuff. But go ahead, Mike.
I mean, I would. You know what I mean? Like it's a bitch for a lack of a better word. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's something that not a lot of athletes can say contributes to their game. And, I don't see quarterbacks having those issues. You hear quarterbacks talk about it all the time when they get to the Super Bowl, when it's in the dome and you have all these cameras flashing and all these lights. And it's like, it definitely changes your perspective and your vision. And in situations like that, I've lost everything. You can't see a single thing in front of you. It's so bright. So I can't speak on what he saw in that moment, but just off of his facial expressions after that and his physical expressions, the way he was, you could see his eyes were watering. He lost something in that light. And it happens, man. And it's, I mean, that's the beauty in the game right there. If it was the other way around, we saw it cut and clear what happened to the Milwaukee Brewers the year the Nationals won it all.
Yep.
Like if Christian Yelich was in right field in that game, they probably go a lot deeper than a lot of people anticipated. So, I mean, you have that conversation about how this changes games and how this changes narratives. But to Miles's point, that was what, 2 runs came in?
Yeah.
It was a 6-0 lead. So I don't like, the math ain't mathing right now. So like, Okay, so he gave up 2, but we had a 6-0 lead. So what happened
Yep.
to the rest? And it's like, at the
Exactly.
end of the day, I agree. You know, it's a team effort. And for me, I get it. Adbert's out, and there's other guys that are out right now or just banged up. But Drew Smiley late in the game, that's what are we doing?
And that's
Yeah,
why
that-
walks are costly too.
Yep, that
Yeah.
too.
Like Miles said, you know, he walked 2 men, and those 2
Mhm.
men that he walked proved to be the 2 runs that won Atlanta the ball game. And this time of year, you cannot walk guys, man. You just can't do it. Walks will kill you. I know that firsthand. I see a team on a regular that's one of the top in allowing walks, you know, in the American League and all of baseball. And there are many times where I've seen the White Sox beat themselves the same way the Cubs beat themselves last night. And when that happens, when you're in a wild card race or a pennant race, it hurts. And I feel for Seiya, but if a fan is blaming him, they wasn't looking at the ball game, if you ask me, because it's you win as a team, you lose as a team. And like David Ross said in his post-game presser yesterday, you know, he's been picking us up. We got to pick him up.
Right. And there's very rare instances too. And so I wanted to pose this question to you because I thought about you when I this morning, pause. I thought about you when I was thinking about it. You know, there's very few instances where this is Andrew Chafin who always said this, as a failed starter, you know, you go to the bullpen and have success. Now, guys like Adbert are an anomaly. Guys who can become one of the top closers in the league when they're a failed starter. You know, I think another guy, Michael Kopech, Garrett Crochet, you know, they do very well in those roles. But more times than not, you have to have confidence to be able to do that. And I didn't see confidence from Drew Smiley all year as a starter. So to close that game against the best offense in baseball, just thought that was an idiotic move, in my personal opinion. Like, I would have went towards a lot of different other guys than Drew Smiley. He hasn't had the command or the repertoire all season long to be able to handle a lineup like that. And to Gabe's point, I mean, you're walking guys because you're afraid to throw to guys. You're afraid to be yourself because you know that you're going to get beat because you're not the best version of yourself. So I think, again, I don't like to throw everything at Ross, but like, how did you feel about that? Did you think that Smiley was the guy you should have went with in this game?
I think honestly, it's one of those things where it's just out of necessity. Like, you have like a lack of guys. You already have guys that are cooked in general. Yeah, you could have gone with Merriweather, but he was probably going to close out the 9th. So it's I don't know. It's rough, you know, because Drew Smiley, and you're right. When it comes to Drew, you can question Drew Smiley stuff. I agree. Like, we've seen how bad Drew Smiley is, you know, but he has been better as a reliever. But even then, in high leverage situations, it's a whole different animal. You guys can speak that to more than I can. But in that scenario, yeah, I mean, obviously, if I have another choice, I'm going to go. And I'll tell you one thing. I use the Cubs and MLB The Show. I'm not pulling Drew Smiley out there in the 8th inning. That's for I'm not getting Drew Smiley out there in the 8th inning. Hell no. So
I'm sure you not.
Man, like, and for me, like, I know he gave up 2 runs, but
yeah,
I would have kept in Javier. Honestly, I really would have, because I feel like Javier, he usually starts off a little rough and then continues to get better. So,
and it's Ronald Acuna.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, that's another thing too. It's like, it's one of the best players, if not the best player in baseball right now. So like, I understand he gave the 2 runs. You can't give 2 runs right there. It's a big game, but like, at the end of the day, it's Ronald Acuna
is the MVP front runner right now.
Yeah.
However you want to look. No disrespect to any of our Mookie Betts fans listening, but I don't care. I truly do not care.
Hey, that's a conversation we could definitely have for sure once we get closer to the end. Like, once we get maybe to the end and it's all, because I'll say this, for me, it is Mookie. But like I said, I'll leave it as a teaser, Mike, and then we'll duel it out.
Hey, I'm not. I just want to know too. I'm not arguing.
I'm interested in wanting to know that one too. So
like,
I know what my eyes have seen.
Yeah.
All I know is if Cody would have played 1 extra month early in the year, I think we'd have that conversation too. But
true, that is true. But now a couple other things before we move on. How about Miles Mastrobuoni's been raking, and I'll say one thing. I was talking smack about Miles Mastrobuoni the whole year, and I'm sorry, Miles, because I know it's your fellow Miles, but man, like, I can't believe this dude is the one that's. Hey, I'm not mad about it, because at the end of the day, I'm glad to be wrong, because at the end of the day, I want this team to be hitting. So, you know, props to Miles Mastrobuoni. How have you felt, Miles, about seeing your fellow Miles do work for the Cubs right now?
That shouldn't be as funny to me as it is. I don't know why. I don't know why. I was trying not to laugh. I've heard this joke my whole life. For some reason, it is going. I mean, no, it's been great. It's been great. I was at the Cubs game on Saturday with my girlfriend, and another solid performance from him that day. And then what it was, he's been great. He's been incredible, and even seeing him kind of just go about his business at third base. He's been solid defensively. You get 3 knocks last night. That's huge. That's the kind of stepping up we need from guys right now. Certain players who maybe have not gotten the opportunities that maybe that they wanted or whatever, however that cookie has crumbled. That's great. That it's stuff like that that's going to keep the Cubs in whatever fight that we have left. It's players like that stepping up and being productive and scoring runs and getting on base and making plays. That's huge. At this point in the year, it is all hands on deck. It can't just be Seiya. It can't just be Cody. It can't just be Dansby. It is not just one person or 2 to 3 people that we could point at. It has to be everyone. And so that's awesome to see, Mastrobuoni perform the way he has this past week, and even going into last night. So I love it. I'm hoping to see that continue because we need it, honestly, right now. We need all the production that we can get out of all these guys. So I'm totally here for it, man.
Yeah, and also not to mention, I was gonna pose this question to you guys. I'm sure if you saw in the rundown, is how much of an impact will Heimer Candelario have? When he came back today, and also should they bench Miles? Are they going to bench Miles? And they answered the question today because they, with the game against the Braves here on this Wednesday evening, they put Tauchman at DH, Bellinger in center field, Candelario at first base, and Mastrobuoni at third base again. So Ross is riding with them, and I think it's one of those things where with guys like that, it's good to ride those hot bats, especially now because you head into an October series. Hopefully they make it. He could be easily an X factor because this dude runs. He's quick. He's solid defensively. Like, why not give this guy a shot? Mike, what have you thought about Miles Mastrobuoni down the stretch? This is a guy who has a 1688 OPS.
Can't stand him. I hate him so much. I hate him so much. I mean, he just makes me look like a fool. And but no, it's so great to see a guy that we acquired in a trade, towards the end of last offseason or towards the beginning of last offseason. Actually, it was towards the end of the season, like immediately after we made that deal. And it's great to see that actually come into fruition. I remember a lot of guys at Wrigley was looking at the lineup and being like, when did they even sign this kid? And I was like, dude, it was super early. It was before every other free agency move. It was before the Wilson Contreras stuff. It was before everything. It just kind of happened. And, to see this happening right now, I have to tip my hat to David Ross, which is very rare, but I will, because, you bet on a guy like this and to see, a not so big time player make big time plays is what the beauty of baseball really is. You know what I mean? Like there's guys all the time that win World Series MVP that you wouldn't expect winning the World Series MVP going into it. If you would have told me that it was going to be Ben Zobrist over Chris Bryant, Javier Baez, Addison Russell, or Anthony Rizzo, or John Lester, I would have told you were crazy. But that's just how it plays, and you got to roll with the dice you have. And the hot hand you have right now is Miles. And, the big key part you made right there is Jeimer coming back. And I think him coming back and being able to fill in that spot, allowing Cody to go to center, frees up a lot more. I think it allows you the opportunity to just have a deeper lineup, especially with Talk being DH. I would love Morel in this lineup every single day. But obviously that's just not the case with Ross. And it is what it is at this point. I have no words for it. This guy has over 25 home runs in less than 100 games played, and you're not going to play him the entire year. It just boggles me. But when you look at the other pieces to it, I think this lineup is one of the more favorable lineups just because what is Pete Crow Armstrong right now? Offensively, you can't play him. Offensively, you can't start him. And I think that's why you see him pinch running and filling in later in games after guys like Tauchman or guys like Miles actually do work. So Nick Madrigal not being back fully healthy either as well is a big part of it. Only part, and I always nitpick at Ross, but I need Morel in that DH spot, man. I mean, I think that's just, it's long term. Respectfully, I do not care about Mike Tauchman. The summer of Mike Tauchman, it's over. It's fall now. I don't care. Like it's over. Your ride, your glory. I hope he gets a bag this offseason. I hope he gets paid. I hope the Yankees pay him and make him come back. But I don't care. And at the end of the day, like, sure, you could say he's good at taking his walks, but I think a guy like Chris, he makes plays, and I want to see Chris more involved in this offense permanently.
Yeah, I think that's honestly, and you're right, Mike. You hit on the nail on the head. Is that's really the only thing that Talkman does for you is take his walks, and I mean, yeah, it's the only thing he does at the top of the order, and that's probably the reason why they keep putting him there. But yeah, I don't blame you either, because I mean, look, Morel is a dude that everyone talks about, like when healthy and playing well, like this could can hit 30 homers, and now what? He's basically almost there. So he's kind of proven it. And yeah, so I don't blame you on that one. Gabe, you could speak to anything else that you wanted to go on the Cubs, but I did want to use this as a nice way to transition into the White Sox, who are 1697 right now. And there, Luis Roberts' season ended early. He heads to the injured list to end the season with MCL sprain. Kind of sum up for us what type of player Luis Robert was this year. How do you feel about him, and what do you think about this decision to kind of call a season early? I mean, it sucks that obviously the season's over in like 4 or 5 days anyways. But what have you thought about his year as a whole?
Special, man. Very special. He's the first White Sox player since Maglio Ordonez in 2001 to hit for 30 plus home runs, hit for 30 plus doubles, and steal 20 plus bases. And to have a 30-30-20 season at the age of 26, after going through some struggles early this year where you saw him get benched against the Tampa Bay Rays because he wasn't hustling down the line in first base and was trying to play through injury without telling Pedro Grifol, he bounced back mightily. I've been to almost half, if not over half, of the White Sox home games this season. And there's been so many games that I could point back to where Luis Robert made a difference. And if it wasn't for Luis Robert, I can't help but wonder where this team would be. And they're not in a great place right now, but there were a lot of games that Luis Robert Jr. won for the White Sox this season and has an effortless swing. And I think once he continues to keep working at his game in the offseason, he'll get better. I don't have no problem with him being shut down because of where the White Sox are in the standings. It's unfortunate though for him, because I do know that Luis's goal coming into the season in spring training, they said he had it written down in his locker on a piece of paper, 150. And that was the number of games that he wanted to play, and he fell short 5 games, playing it only in 145. But this is the most amount of games he's played in, and I think the best is yet to come for him. And I really hope that Chris Getz and the new front office regime find a way to build a winner around Luis Robert Jr. while he's here. And I hope that these White Sox fans appreciate him while he's here, no matter what the state of this team is, because center fielders and outfielders like him don't come around 35th and Shields that often. And I think, like I've said many times before, he has a chance to be one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player, ever don White Sox pinstripes on the South Side.
Yep. I mean, yeah, you said it best. I mean, this is a guy who, does it all. He literally does it all. He does it. He's fast. He's one of the better defenders, if not the best defender in center field in the AL. He's second in MLB with, a 13 outs above average for center fielders there, and 38 home runs, just too short of 40. So this he's a beast, man. There's a reason they call this guy La Pantera. So, Mike, what have you thought? What do you think about Luis Robert and the season he had, as well as what he means to the White Sox in general, man, going forward?
Derrick Rose. I think I look at Derrick Rose and I look at his young career and I look at Luis Robert and I see two of the same. I really do. I mean, I see a 6-tool guy who is absolutely phenomenal. And when they acquired him, I was pissed because, well, actually, I was pissed, but I wasn't pissed. I was upset because I know the Cardinals were the number 2 team that were in on him. So I was like, all right, well, all right, that's fine. I'll take it. That's fine. I'll eat that. I'll take Jordan Walker all day over Luis Robert. But man, no, to Gabe's point, man. I mean, it's love on the South Side. You don't see guys like that, not only just on the South Side, but in Chicago at all. These are guys that, I knock on Luis a lot just because I'm a Cubs fan, but the center fielder in me is in love with this kid, like on a real level. Like this kid is absolutely insane. And the leader that he is going to become, as a lot of people talk about the language barrier and so many different things, but like it's going to continue to develop. It's going to continue to come, and he's going to not only become physically the best player on this team, which he already is by a country mile, but vocally, I think he's going to become a leader because he's been through the dog days here and he's been through the ups, he's been through the downs. And, I mentioned Derrick Rose so early because that was the same issue with Derrick Rose and the Chicago Bulls, was failing to put guys around him. And like we could say whatever we want to say as fans, as Chicagoans. Oh, Luol Deng was great, and Joakim Noah and Boozer. Okay, but Melo was out there, Bron was out there, Wade was out there, Bosch was out there. All these guys were out there, and we came up with nothing. You know what I mean? We came up with Carlos Boozer. And that's what it comes down to. And that's the same thing with the Chicago White Sox. You bring in the Dallas Keuchels, the Andrew Benintendis of the world, when there's Machados, there's Harpers, there's, all Garrett Crochets and all these other guys, or Garrett Coles, pardon me, we already got Crochet. But you got the Garrett Coles of the world that are becoming available. And you got to go after those guys as the Rheindorfs. I mean, because you got this kid. I do want to give Rick Hahn credit. I want to credit him, but also as a player, I hate it. The way he signs these international kids on super cheap deals. I mean, he was one of the first guys to really do this. I mean, he's locking up Luis Robert. Forgive me if I don't have the numbers correct. It's like for him and Eloy, it's like 5 years for what, $50-80 million in between.
Yeah. He signed. He's not. I don't think Luis is a free agent until like 2027 or 2028. And that's the thing. Like, he's going to be around for the next 5 years. That's right. Why it was so crazy when I would listen to fans propose these trade ideas for Luis Robert Jr. when the White Sox were in the cellar and we all knew that they were going to seek to sell at the deadline. Like, that's not a guy that you just trade. Actually, right. He has 3 years left. He has 3 years left on this deal, but like 26, 27, he has team options. If he continues to play at the level at which he's played at, those team options are automatic given. They're gonna cash those.
Opening day, that's gonna be checked off.
You already know that. So I mean, and like I said, it sucks that he can't get to 40 homers, because if he did, he would have been the first White Sox player since Todd Frazier in 2016 to hit 40 plus homers. And I think he's really in the running for the Silver Slugger Award, and he's damn sure in the running for the Gold Glove. With the way that this man is able to track down fly balls in center field is second to none, man. And if he could just learn how to slide, I think this dude is capable of stealing 30 plus bases a year and being a 30-30 guy in the league, if not more, if they encourage him to run more. And I know why he doesn't, because he wants to stay healthy and whatnot, but he's a guy that leads by example. He don't have to talk about it. He is about it.
100%. And that was my big point, Saul, with you too. Like, we talked about that, bro. Like, we talk about good deals. Like, Seiya Suzuki right now, $85 million over what, 4 or 5 years? I mean, bro, they got Luis Robert on a 6-year, $50 million deal.
I remember.
Like, free my boy Rick Hahn is all I'm gonna say, because Hahn was putting down work. Now, there was 50-50 balls, like Yohan got paid and probably shouldn't have got paid. But, like, I mean, he set it up in a great way to where, like, Rick Hahn is what saved the organization right now, and he's gone.
But that's the trend. That was the trend when Luis signed. You got to think he was signing like a couple of years after the Braves signed Ozzie Albies to like a real short-term. And that deal is criminal, by the way. He's one of the most underpaid players in the game. And Lord knows when he signed that deal, my first question was like, who is his agent? But I understand why they take that money coming from where they come from in Latin America. That's life-changing money to those guys. It's that second deal that they're going to re-up on, and they're going to break the bank.
Right.
Yeah, and then that happens a lot. That I think that happens more often than people realize, right? An extension especially during a deal. Yeah, especially during now. Especially, I feel like I see it a lot in football. When people talk about that, like deals within a deal to extend it and give guy more money because he deserves more money. So, I think that's something that would happen. And I think if Luis Robert didn't play on the south side of Chicago, Gabe, I think people would, and if he ran more, that people would be talking about him like they talk about Ronald Acuna. Honestly, because he does everything. Like fielding, like he's just a beast. So it's crazy. But Miles, I'll give you a shot. What have you thought about Luis Robert over the years? What kind of impact do you think you'll have on this kind of the next wave of the young players that are coming up with the Sox, like a Colson Montgomery and all that?
Dude, he's an absolute monster out there, and I like a point that Gabe made, just kind of how he commands the outfield. I've seen about 10 plays he's made in center this year that most center fielders are probably hucking it towards the ball, and he's very casual on some deep fly balls where he is moving a long ways to his right or his left. Very casual. And so that's just, I don't know, man. You want to keep a guy around him like this. You want to build around him because, I don't know, man. And just from a baseball player standpoint, you don't want to see like other teams really fail in that aspect. You still want to see like other players thrive in a sense. Other teams kind of thrive. Outside of the fact that you're playing against that team, obviously, you don't ever really want to see an organization go through what they've kind of gone through, like the White Sox have. So I've always been a huge fan of Luis Robert. And I'm hoping the Sox can build something around him because this is a very special year that he's had. And really, we haven't seen the best of him yet. That's the crazy part to me. I don't even think we've seen Luis Robert in his final form as Chicago White Sox. So I think with the new management that they got in there, I'm hoping that there's a mentality to build around this guy and add some pieces because I don't care what anyone says. When the Sox are winning ball club, it's pretty fun to go to. It's pretty fun to go to the South Side. You know, they were playing the Percolator a few years ago. My dad was dancing. You should not be dancing, by the way. Sit down, Dad. Sit down. That's the point. I just want to see this team win. It's great seeing players like Luis Robert play as well as you have. Build around him. Build around him. And I also want to see Tim Anderson bounce back. And just, this is a team that I'm rooting for all around. Just all around. This entire organization. This whole year has been a lot for Sox fans.
Tim
I'm glad you brought up my boy TA. Because I know TA. And I know what he built made of, man. And if it's one person that I'm betting on to have a bounce back season, I don't give a damn if he's in a White Sox uniform or not. It's him.
Right.
And I watched the way that the city is turned on him and even some of the fan base. And I understand sometimes his demeanor can rub people the wrong way. But when this team failed to get Manny Machado, he stepped up and became the face of the franchise. And he did a damn good job doing it. And he became the face of a marketing campaign that was one of the sleeker campaigns that this team had in many years with the Change the Game slogan and whatnot, man. And I believe in him. And I really hope that Chris has a conversation with him about transitioning over to second base to welcome in Colson Montgomery when it's his time. Because I feel like by moving to second base and getting his batting average back to where it once was, he can make a lot of money at that position.
Right. I also feel like, listen, I talk a lot about TA just because of certain things that happened and transpired throughout this season.
I understand
on the field. I will only talk about things that happen on the field, but there, we're 0 for 1 in a couple of different sports right now for TA. And Nick Madrigal has more home runs, but that's neither here nor there. But in all seriousness, man, like life is a big factor into this. And there is a lot of, I'm not going to speak into it. If you want to do your own research and you want to go through Twitter and everything, that's perfectly fine for all the listeners. But there are things Tim Anderson's going through in his personal life right now that is not open to the world. That is, and if you're following him and obviously like individuals like Gabe who are very close into that world and understanding what's going on inside the clubhouse, he's got a lot of shit going on. And, sometimes that comes out onto the field. You think this man just punched Jose in the face for no reason? He just wanted to squabble just to squabble? Like, that's not TA. That's never been TA. Not one to back down to it, but he's also not one to just, get engaged like that. So there's a lot of things going on in TA's life right now. And I love that you said that because, again, we mentioned D Rose earlier. I've watched the city turn on a lot of guys who we once loved and praised. And I see young minorities and young kids in this city, repping these guys' jerseys on their backs, running through the city in summertime shy. And, to have that change very quickly, it can be very detrimental to a player's mental health and a player as a whole when they already have other things going on in their life. So, I think, with Luis taking that step as the face of the franchise and Tim just kind of, again, like you said, Montgomery going in the short, Tim going to second. Hey, just focus on you. Let's get the best version of you possible. I think you're going to be able to see that going into 2024.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be a great help. And I think, as you guys talked about it as well, too, the fact that he'll become more of a leader. I see that, too. I know that that's been one of the questions, that the White Sox have had of who's the leader and whatever. But I think also leaders are made even without them even realizing it. I think once you get older, get a little wiser, guys like that. I'm sure Luis Robert will speak out. Luis Robert will do this. I think we forget how young he is. So I think that's how people, see it. So, yeah, hopefully that works out. I think the last thing I wanted to ask concerning the White Sox, Gabe, was It's a 2-1. How did you feel about that Chris Sale start? He struck out 7 White Sox in that. How did you feel seeing him again? I believe it was like the 4th time him facing the White Sox. And also, how did you feel about another up and come or another lefty that's on the White Sox currently, which is Garrett Crochet? He pitched in that same game. How did you feel about his first appearance back?
Seeing Chris Sale is always like seeing an old friend for me. It just makes me think back to the times I used to go to games when the team wasn't playing at a high level. And it was one point in time, even though I was a White Sox fan and I watched every game, I stayed away. But whenever Chris pitched, I was there. And to see him performing at a high level, albeit against the White Sox, it was cool to see, especially knowing what he's gone through since getting to Boston and having success his first 2 seasons with all-star appearances en route to a World Series ring in 2018 alongside of Mookie Betts and Andrew Benintendi, who's now a White Sox. That was cool. But as far as seeing Garrett Crochet, I think he fared well for the most part. I didn't really care for the situation in which he came into the game, per se, being a high leverage situation in his first return. But with as depleted of a bullpen as the White Sox have right now, so many guys down, I guess you have no choice but to put him in that position. My only question is will we see him within the last 4 games left to play? I don't know. But I don't think he looked that bad. I mean, the only thing that kind of concerned me a little bit was the velocity on his fastball was down and that he, got into trouble a little bit walking a batter, but giving up hits and failure to close out the 8th with 2 outs is what cost him the game. But it was his first, major league action in over 2 months. So I think for the most part, he did well, but I'm more curious to see what Garrett Crochet's role is going to be in 2024. Is this a guy that you see starting, or is this a guy that you see being a long relief guy out of your bullpen?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people see it more as he'll come out of the bullpen next year because of just the fact that he hasn't had a lot of starting pitching appearances and all that in a long time and all that. But at the same time, I think he could do both because I think he could do start him off maybe in the bullpen and then kind of ease him into like starting role or long reliever. But I've always thought about this dude being like a great weapon for the White Sox, regardless of where he comes out of, because he's just such a talent. And I mean, we saw him in even games in the postseason in 2020. So yeah, it should be exciting to see what they do with him because he's a good weapon. As we wrap up here, the last obviously there's a lot of postseason races going on there, but I think none hotter, I believe, than the AL West, because that I feel like I said, every minute I feel like this changes the standings. It's the Mariners, the Astros, the Rangers. With the Rangers up top right now, they're leading by 2.5 games over the Astros. Astros lead the Mariners by half a game. They're battling it out right now. It's good. It's going to be interesting. Another race as well is not, I feel like, not talked about enough because obviously there's so many other races. But the AL East with the Orioles and the Rays, I mean, there's still 2 games that separate those 2 teams. So the question I wanted to pose to you guys as we wrap up here is, what will have more of a predictable ending? What will be more predictable, the AL West conclusion or the AL East conclusion? Because in my opinion, if the Rays were to come out and win the American League East, I'm sure plenty of people predicted that over the Orioles winning the AL East going into this season. I believe when you look at the AL West, I think a more predictable ending would be like the Astros coming back. I know it's a little rough right now with basically 4 games left, but what do you guys see as more predictable, the AL West, AL East? I'll start with you, Miles. What do you think, man?
That's tough. I do agree that I think the West is a little bit more predictable, just in a sense where I look at the Orioles and I look at the Rays. These are 2 teams that are really neck and neck in terms of just how they're playing ball. I do think the Orioles are a better ball club, but I still can't put my finger on one of those teams. And I don't know. I do believe, kind of with the history of the Astros and how they've played over the past 6 years, I think it's either them or the Rangers. So to me, that's a little more predictable. I think it's much tighter in the East, but at the same time, you can still make an argument for kind of any one of these options you gave us. So I don't know. I think I still have the Astros maybe pushing past the Rangers just because they've been there, done that. And even if not, they're going to go in the playoffs. Been there, done that. It's a very well-seasoned ball club. The Orioles and the Rays are two very hungry teams that are kind of neck and neck right now.
Yeah, and it's like, especially with the Mariners and just how things are going there. I mean, they still have a shot. I mean, they're the Rangers lose the next 3 out of the next 4. They all of a sudden they come out of nowhere and they win the division. So that's what it's gonna be a crazy ending for sure. But Mike, what about you, man? Which of those 2 divisions do you see coming down as more predictable than the other?
I think the more predictable one is the AL East. I think really because you look at it and you understand, like, listen, it's going to come down to those two. I think nobody really saw the Yankees having the depleted season that they had. The Red Sox, I mean, 76 games as of right now, it's kind of a win considering the roster that they have constructed right now. So and Trevor Story not playing the majority of the year. The one that's like odd to me about the East really quick is like, I feel like it's weird that the Blue Jays never really had their moment. Like they were kind of always there. And it's like, this is a young team up and coming, Bo Bichette, Vladdy Jr., you bring in Springer and these Kirk and all these guys, big Kirko. But you have that conversation and you're like, oh, well, now it's the Orioles division. Now it's Tampa's division. And I'm like, when did the Blue Jays just fall off the map? But yeah, I think, it's set in stone that it's between 2 teams. And then when you look at the AL West, I mean, there's 3 teams that are all within a game or 2 of each other. And it's pretty crazy. And I would even say if Mike Trout finished the season healthy and Ohtani finished the season healthy, they're sitting at 71 games right now. If those 2 didn't go down, where would they be at in the standings? Would they be at I still think they'd be behind. They'd be probably at 80 to 81 games. But I mean, they're right behind the Mariners then at in 4th place, 85 to 81, 82 games. I mean, this could be a race where everybody but the Athletics would have been in this. And, I think they haven't even skated 50. That's insane. But, you have that conversation about it's going to come down to the matchups and it's going to come down to what your schedule is. And Cubs are kind of in a similar situation right now. We're looking at who we're facing up against versus who, Houston or Texas might be going up against. So I think definitely the East to me would be the favorite to the most common.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's one of those things too, where you look at the way that the division, how close the AL West has been all year long, and the AL East kind of has gone this way to another, and even 2 games right now seems like a lot. Not only for every team, but for the Orioles right now, that lead seems pretty big. But with the 4 games left, I think now it's gonna be interesting regardless. By the time we get here till 2 p.m. on Sunday. So, Gabe, what do you think about either these 2 divisions? Having more predictable outcome.
I think the American League East has the predictable outcome. I remember we did a show, me and you saw prior or right after the All-Star break, actually, when we talked about the East, and I was saying how Baltimore is coming. I saw Baltimore surpassing Tampa Bay for many reasons, and that's the team I believed in from the moment I saw them early this year take on the White Sox. They're never out of ball games, and that's a team that since Adley Rutschman has come up from the minors into the show, they have yet to get swept by an opponent. And that says a lot, especially with the way that they got manhandled by the Cubs at Wrigley on Father's Day weekend and still found a way to overcome a sweep that Sunday when Peacock was in town with NBC. So just looking at the East, I think it's Baltimore's to lose. Toronto, yeah, like Mike said, they never have had their moment, and they're still fighting for a wild card spot. And if they were unable to get in, you're talking about 2 out of the last 3 years in which they missed getting in the playoffs despite finishing well over 500. That would be tough. So hopefully, they can hang on for one of those wild card spots. But the West, it's going to be a tough race. I think Texas has it. And the only reason why I think Texas has it is because Houston blew it. Houston had a 3-game series against Kansas City with a chance to put their foot on the Rangers' neck, and they got swept. And this matchup that they have with Seattle as it is recording, which is the rubber match of their 3-game set, could determine whether or not they're either in the playoffs or on the outside looking in, as they have 3 games left after the series with Seattle against the D-backs on the road. So, I mean, from where I stand, I see the American League East being the more predictable journey. The AL West, I don't know what's going to happen, but I think Texas has it. And I think if Houston is on the outside looking into the playoffs this year, which would really suck with them being the defending champs, they're going to look back at that series where they got swept by the A's and that series where they got swept by the Royals in late September in front of their home fans in Minute Maid and really be pissed off about it.
Yeah, I think, these situations, with these teams, like you look at those little games, right? And it's kind of how we mentioned with the Cubs and certain things that happen in July. It's like, man, it just shows you, it proves to you every game counts, even back in April, because all those things count towards your wins and losses. So, it's crazy to say when you're sitting there in the middle of April, that this game's going to impact at the end, but it's just the truth. There's no way around it. But I think it's a good place to wrap things up for this edition of the At Bat Podcast. I want to thank my co-hosts today, Miles Porter, as well as Gabe Wilkins. And I want to thank Mike Hughes as well for joining us this week. Of course, check out all our other war content like War Media Bears Den, as well as Slam Society, and all our other shows, as well as our Substack. So check that out. Again, I am Saul Rodriguez. Thanks for watching and hope everyone has a great week.